Hello, everybody. Here in the gallery and joining us online, I would like to welcome everybody to the Planning Board meeting of September 4th, 2023 for the City of Summerside. I will call the meeting to order here at 12:01. The volume is very loud. I don't know if we can... Is it louder than normal? It seems very... it seems much louder than normal. I will call for a motion to, again, this is a planning board meeting, so we have planning board members here, Councillor Duran, Councillor Morrison, Councillor Snow is not here. I'm also on planning board, so we do have a quorum. But I would ask for one of the planning board members to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Morrison, second. There's no choice there. It's you, Councillor Duran. Are you both in favor of the agenda? Yes? Anyone opposed? None of us. So we'll carry with the agenda as presented. We begin all of our meetings with a land acknowledgement where we acknowledge that the land upon which we gather is the unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Abogway is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to Indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 12,000 years, past, present, and future. Item 4, a conflict of interest declaration from either of the planning board members or any member of council with respect to the item before us today. Hearing none, we'll move to item 5 here, and this is the recommendation with respect to 678 Water Street East. Preliminary subdivision approval, and this is where I hand it over to you, Councillor Duran, as Chair of Planning Board.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Okay. 12 noon, just testing. Yes, so a preliminary subdivision approval application for 678 Water Street East. I expect this is in relation to the ongoing rezoning application, but also a separate matter, or no, it's not? Totally separate. Okay, so this is just a preliminary subdivision approval application, 678 Water Street East. Just wanted to make that clear either way, just so in case anyone's wondering how it relates to other projects in the area. So, purpose is to subdivide PID number 72421, creating parcel B to be consolidated to lot 1, and parcel R, public street and easement for a temporary cul-de-sac, and the remainder of PID number 72421. The planning board is required to make a recommendation to council on this application, and preliminary approval is required by council before the development can proceed. Background: application was received from Strategic Holdings Inc. to subdivide this parcel to build a street and extend municipal services and consolidate parcel B with lot 1 to allow the development of a 59-unit apartment building. The proposed subdivision layout is indicated on preliminary survey plan prepared by Locus Surveys Limited, drawing number 20051-S01, dated August 28th, 2023. Report. As required under section 3.6 of the Subdivision and Site Development Bylaw, Council, Planning Board, and the Development Officer shall consider the following general criteria when reviewing development applications under this bylaw as applicable. A, conformity with this bylaw. Staff comment: this subdivision promotes smart growth, making effective use of the land, and applies to the principle of orderly and following. The developer's plan for servicing the proposed 59-unit building and future development of remaining land to the south meets the general intent of this bylaw. The proposed street is required to extend to the end of the proposed consolidated property unless a development agreement is in place for the remaining street along the proposed consolidated lot prior to starting construction. The development agreement between the city and the developer ensures the remaining street or streets and servicing is/are extended to allow further development on the remaining lands. The developer will have to enter into a construction agreement with the City of Summerside for the construction of the proposed street and temporary cul-de-sac turning area prior to starting construction. There is adequate power grid capacity to connect the apartment building. Designs need to be completed and approved prior to connection of the building. There's power grid capacity to available. Okay. There's power grid capacity available to extend the power grid down the proposed street and have future development of the remaining lands. Future discussions between the electric utility and the developer would need to take place on future plans. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment, the subdivision conforms to the official plan as the current land use for the property is residential. C, conformity with the zoning bylaw. Staff comment, the proposed lot conforms with the zoning bylaw as the land is zoned high-density residential R4. D, the orderly and following nature of the development. Staff comment, this development promotes residential growth and is an example of infilling vacant land. The developer will need to provide a future street map for the remainder of the property to show how the remainder of the property is to connect to the existing street east of the development and future streets to the west for this area below Water Street East. E, physical suitability of the site for the proposed development, including avoidance of natural hazards, undue water runoff, or environmental damage. Staff comment, the site is suitable for development. The developer will be required to provide a wetland delineation prior to future development. The development will have to meet PEI Department of Environment regulations for working near or in a buffer area. The developer will be required to install any environmental protections required by the Department of Environment and his consulting engineers. F, compatibility of the proposed development with the present and future surrounding patterns of streets, lots and services, including conformity with any city concept plans. Staff comment, the development of the high-density residential lot is intended to be developed upon subdivision approval. The remainder of land will be developed at a later date. The proposed street location, right-of-way, generally meets with city street patterns for this and surrounding properties. The proposed street row accommodates a future right turn lane onto Water Street East as development occurs. The developer is responsible for a new water main, forced main, storm mains, and street to service this building and future development to the south of this lot. Space entering the proposed development is limited for overhead power line infrastructure given the density of current plans and may further restrict with plans of turning lanes and realigning Gillespie Avenue. Power grid can be extended to support all of these plans, though it may need to be extended via underground means to accommodate all proposals given the limited space for poles and aerial cable, other needed utilities, and nearby existing or proposed buildings. G, adequacy of the applicant's proposals for traffic circulation, parking, pedestrian access, water supply, sewage disposal, and storm drainage, including the adequacy of city streets and services to handle increased loads. Staff comment, the proposed street is forming a new intersection with Water Street East. The city plans to realign the existing intersection of Gillespie Avenue and Water Street East so the proposed street and Gillespie Avenue form a four-way intersection. The city has available capacity for water supply and sewage disposal for this development. H, suitability of parkland provisions. Staff comment, parkland dedication is required for a major residential subdivision based on buildable area. Council may defer parkland all or a portion of parkland dedication. Parkland fees would apply to parcel B. The buildable area will be calculated upon the wetland delineation as shown on the survey plan. At council's discretion, the parkland dedication shall be 10% land or $3,550 per acre monetary park contribution based on buildable area. Parkland dedication for lands outside the buildable area would be calculated by at least twice as much as the buildable area. The city has sufficient green space, Wilmot Community Park, within 100 meters of the subject property. The city is proposing to satisfy the parkland dedication with monetary dedication. The parkland contributions shall be put in a fund reserved solely for acquiring or expanding public parks within the city. I, impacts on city finances and budgets. Staff comment, the preliminary subdivision approval application will have an impact on city finances and budgets as the city should budget the realignment of Gillespie Avenue to coincide with this proposed street construction. If future plans for road realignment and turning lanes are implemented, budgets should be allocated for power line modifications at this time unless these plans can be accounted for in initial power line construction. J, proof of conformity with any applicable provincial legislation and regulations. Staff comment, the developer shall conform with all provincial requirements as applicable. The developer will have to submit the street plans and servicing to the Department of Environment for approval. And K, other matters as considered relevant, and staff comment, not applicable. Staff review. Staff support the application from Strategic Holdings, Inc. for a preliminary subdivision to subdivide PID number 72421, creating parcel B to be consolidated to Lot 1, and parcel R, public street and easement for a temporary cul-de-sac, and the remainder of PID number 72421, intended for high-density residential development, be recommended to be approved by council, subject to the following. 1, the developer shall satisfy all municipal servicing requirements. 2, the developer enters into a subdivision construction agreement. 3, the developer shall satisfy the parkland dedication requirements. And 4, the developer must enter a development agreement with the City of Summerside to defer any subdivision responsibilities. As per section 8.5 of the Subdivision and Site Development Bylaw, the Planning Board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The Planning Board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward for council for a final decision. I guess before we read the recommendation and call for the Planning Board vote, are there any questions or comments from council?
Yep. I just wanted to comment the same as before, the rationale for saying no to this whole development area. I'm not sure if my the quotes from last time, if I need to say it again, but I will, because it's going to be a safety issue. We cannot put any more traffic onto Water Street East. We cannot put any more pressures on our emergency services team, that's fire and police. This amendment, it's only going to make the traffic, pedestrian safety issues worse. I find it very disappointing to see comments in G and I regarding making it a four-way intersection, when right now as a city, we're struggling with Greenwood Drive intersection. This would actually be worse because it is the volume of traffic. I think we said we had 18,000 cars a day go through there. People have trouble now crossing the road, so it's a recipe for disaster. We have approved projects that now have completed, and there are major traffic issues. So never mind that 30% of this property is in a provincially noted floodplain. So for me, I'm totally against this going through right now.
Hi, thank you. I sort of similar to Councillor Adams. On F, it says the proposed street right-of-way accommodates a future right turn lane onto Water Street as development occurs. I would say any street that's going in there right now almost needs a right turning lane, because and so if we just say you need to leave room for it, the developer is off the hook and doesn't have to put that lane in, or is that going to be on the city finances down the road once we get a few units in there?
I guess this project that's being talked about is for the 59 unit building up on the existing lot in Water Street. This is not the application that was before us a week or two ago about the remaining parcel. This is not about the 12 unit building that's being built either. There's 3 separate things that are going on, all with the same applicant. The right-of-way width typically would be a 15-meter right-of-way width for a street, a local street. We're taking an additional right-of-way width at Water Street East to allow to have a third lane if the entire area down below gets developed. We wouldn't be having a right turn lane for a 59 unit building by itself. So we just made sure we took an additional right-of-way width at where it approaches Water Street if all the land below gets developed. And yes, we would be developing it at a future time.
Would the city be developing it, or would the developer have to, as part of that?
Yeah.
I guess we're not building another road, so we just, if that future expansion down through that field
Yes.
goes ahead, there's a strong possibility that we need that right-hand turn.
Right. And as part of a development approval, we could come back and say that we need to have a right turn lane up at Water Street, make it a condition of approval of however many lots down
That would be
below.
on the developer.
we could
Yeah.
put that in if council desires at that time on whenever the future development happens. We're not gonna make a
Yeah.
2-3 lane access at the front for a 59 unit, but we
no,
wanna
and
make sure
I-
we keep the right of way width at the time. We don't wanna
Right,
have to have them lay out and then all of a sudden we don't have it, but yes, we're not including it. If we wanna include that future when you approve, if they come in, if it's developable, down below. And, a condition of that, if you wanna say that this lane at the top has to be widened and part of the development, we can make that as part of the approval at that
Oh,
time.
I certainly think it should be part of it, something, yeah.
Yep.
And it shouldn't be on the city. If somebody else development it, it shouldn't be on the city. Thanks.
I appreciate the fact, Aaron, that you said, like, it has nothing to do with the other part, but it does have something to do with the other part, because it's all going to be a major mess getting out onto Water Street East. And we're talking about realigning Gillespie onto this whenever we need to be working at alleviating traffic off of Water Street East with the east-west connector that's been on the budget now for 2 different years. And so parking, like, is that something we get into here? Because where would parking even occur for this?
We'll deal with that on this site development, but what he is proposing is a small lot out front. The rest of it's gonna be underground parking for the building. He's doing the majority of his parking underground parking.
Okay,
On, I'll say within the existing footprint, he's not.
right,
And then a small overflow at the front.
overflow outside, okay.
That will come onto this side street, not onto Water Street.
So sort of like Portside type of deal, like underground some and then
yes,
outside some,
yeah.
okay.
I just was clarifying that because Councillor Drawn had mentioned that this was in relation to the applicant that we had 2 weeks ago, just to say that this is the same application that was here in 2020 and got stalled for multiple reasons, and they've rejuvenated that project.
Do you have a
Okay,
question? Do
I
you
need
wanna go?
clarification. So you just said this proposal came forward in 2020?
Correct. Well, they rezoned the land, they started working on this, the building drawings and the street drawings back in 2020, and it never got finalized. It was probably 90-some% complete of the drawings of the building and the street. And I can't speak to why, I don't know why it's, I mean, we started that, we did the first meeting actually in 2020 in COVID. It's our first meeting we had in there. Whether that played into why it didn't go at that time, I can't speak.
Okay.
So, Aaron, none of this was approved then in 2020? It didn't get that far?
The rezoning did. The original lot up top was a commercial lot. And it got revised or rezoned to residential. And in order to fit the size of building on there, he needed to increase the size of that lot to fit this, which is why the piece in the back just recently getting added onto it to say that's what's highlighted in red is the size of this entire lot that would be for the 59 unit.
That had to be added onto it to make the
Correct.
square footage enough for the building to,
Correct.
okay. And the street coming in off of Water Street East,
Right there.
the
and then
developer's required to put in now, is it only going to where the red line crosses the bottom of it?
Right there, yes.
Yeah,
And
that's what
then-
he's required to do now?
Yeah, we'll go to another sketch there. Right there, what's in red is it will be putting in now.
Yeah,
What's in light blue, we'll sign a development agreement to say, if in fact the rest of this goes ahead, this piece of the street in a development agreement is responsible when any remaining land gets developed.
yeah.
If they don't go ahead, or if it doesn't get environmental approval to go across this area or in a different alignment. Yeah, so we want you have a clause in your subdivision plan that allows you, we just did one in the last 2 weeks for off of Simmons. They bought a large piece of land and they're, in that case, deferring all the street right away in that case. This one here, they're deferring a portion of it. Enough to get us in to the back entrance of the building, which will have the underground parking and provide a turnaround, and then if they go left or straight down below.
So that's what the yellow is, the turnaround spot, I assume?
Correct, that's just showing it. The red will be an actual deeded over to the city, the yellow will just be a temporary easement until
Okay.
such time as the road continues or.
Okay, thank you.
So, but isn't it true that the reason it stalled in 2020 was because the province wouldn't approve the road because there's so much marshland there?
No, the province approved we have an environmental permit
Okay.
from the province for this development to proceed. So
But wasn't there an issue with the road part with the province, and it couldn't be approved because of?
we were given a copy of
environment?
a development approval from the Department of Environment for
Okay.
this development to go ahead. Why the project didn't proceed,
Okay.
yeah. But we'd asked for a copy, just like we were asking here for,
Yeah.
and we have one on file from
Okay.
2020.
Great. Thanks, Aaron and Linda, and your team there for this recommendation. I think it was clear and well-considered and concise, the package before us. I reviewed this package, the official plan and the subdivision bylaw, and I certainly will be supporting staff's recommendation here. I do have a couple of questions, though. Do we know if these units for this housing development are affordable housing?
At the time last year, or sorry, in 2020, they were. I haven't been confirmed that, but at that time they were to be, and that was some of the push was on. And again, it was trying to qualify again for certain timeframes to meet the funding parameters for that fund. So I can't say for sure, but that was the plan in 2020.
That was the objective,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, because we all know we certainly need affordable housing in the community. Couple questions. I did want to just ask again a little bit. It did come up with Councillor Adams just about, there is a discussion in here about a potential future four-way intersection with Gillespie. How would that even look? Gillespie is further down the road, isn't it?
Gillespie is just, I'll have to get you another sketch. Gillespie is slightly to the left or to the west.
Yeah.
Gillespie comes out on an angle that's not 90 degrees. So back in 2020, when this was brought forward, the land across the road was owned by the province. We did an alignment on paper, surveying wise, to say, could we bring over Gillespie to line up? So we acquired that property from the province. Yeah, I think if we zoom in a little bit, the small little stub on the top there, I'm not sure where the plus is on the.
Yeah, it is. It's green space. There's like a cut grass across the street,
Yeah,
right? from
there is a
this proposed
seniors
street.
unit that's on part of it, but
Yeah.
it is just grass. We're saying if they line up Gillespie so it doesn't come out on an angle but comes more on a 90 degree to Water Street East, it lines up with this new street location. So it's on an angle there. It's basically move over where Linda's showing her hands to come over. And then we'd be able to accommodate we'd done a review for pedestrian crossings. That was in last year's. We said then we stalled it until this project went ahead. We didn't want to put them in there and then move them 10 meters or 20 meters up the road. So the intent was, if this was to realign, the recommendation, I think, was to put a set of it's called RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacons that are in a couple of the locations on the crosswalk there to allow pedestrians to hit those if they want to cross. It wasn't to be a signalized intersection. It was to be a pedestrian button signals to allow them, but to make that into a four-way intersection. Because right now, that 59 unit is going to come out, and then there's going to be an intersection at Gillespie just off it. So if somebody's coming into Gillespie and goes to go to Reed's Corner, they both decide to turn left, they're both going to be into each other. So it's to move over Gillespie to align up at this
Okay.
future road.
So the city has acquired the property to make sure that the intersection would
We did
align
that, and-
properly, and then things like light consideration would be based on traffic.
Yep.
And pedestrian needs
Yep.
in the future. Okay. Another quick question. Now, this is a little bit off topic on the package itself, but it's a question that came up, so maybe I can pass it on to the deputy CAO just for follow-up. Just when I was reviewing the package, looking at the parkland contributions, they're put in a fund reserved solely for acquiring or expanding public parks within the city. And I know how that works. I'm just wondering if, Deputy, if we can just make a note to potentially put that on a future committee of the whole meeting, and if the fund exists already, what the balance is of that fund and how we go about allocating that fund. And have a discussion at future council on that at some point, I think would be.
The fund exists, and there's, accounting will tell us this is every year how much is in it. They've told us previous years that there's, I don't know, I'd be guessing, but
Yeah, I just guess when I was reading, I was thinking, is there opportunity to also review that fund to look at, is it an opportunity to spend some of those dollars on climate mitigation measures as well as parkland? So I just wanted to park it as a committee of the whole discussion for the future. And then the last one I have here, Director, is on the street itself, on parcel R. In our official plan, in section 3 of our official plan, we are to encourage pedestrian-friendly road design, to make sure street projects and major reconstruction transportation projects are appropriate and adequate, have appropriate and adequate right-of-way and are safe for convenient movement of all users. And our official plan references the integration and use of complete streets in our neighborhoods. So my question would be, if there is an opportunity either at this stage or to ask council to potentially consider it under, well, I don't know if it would be under the subdivision construction agreement, to require that the streets are complete streets that promote pedestrian usage as well as vehicular access, particularly because if there's 59 units and people moving across the park space and the trail network across the street, whether that would be considered at that stage.
It's not in our initial, I'll say our guidelines or our policies for the subdivision bylaw requiring it. It's requiring us to have a right-of-way that can fit it outside of the curb surface. I'd have to review what, typically we wouldn't have the subdivision or the development plans as detailed as we have at this stage. I can check to see what he's allowed for on this site plan itself to say if they have any. We have a sidewalk that goes across directly in front of this property. I know the front area in front of the building is where they have a small parking, like overflow parking. I don't know if they've incorporated, if that's one of their entrances in one of their building, just directly to that sidewalk without going on this street. I know that's the driveway into the underground parking. But your question is, we do not have it on our criteria or conditions requirements for sidewalks to be in at the time. It's to make sure we have a right-of-way wide enough at the time to fit it. But we can check to see on this particular case if they've done any own internal sidewalks that can direct their 59 for the immediate concern to the existing sidewalk that's on Water Street East.
Yeah, I think just especially if we were talking about deferred street portion, and I know there are other parcels down here that are under consideration. I don't want to have to come back later and say, now we need to put a sidewalk in and we're stuck holding it. And if that would be, and I think one of our requirements here also is to look at making sure that our pedestrian networks are connected to one another. So potentially if you can either, I don't know if council can consider that, council is welcome, if they're welcome to consider that, to require a complete street along parcel R, or if it is at the staff level working with the developer to find ways to explore that as a possibility.
Staff level is just implementing the current policies, and the current policy does not require a developer to place any new sidewalks in their street right away.
Yeah, I know I've read it. I know it doesn't, but it doesn't say they're not required to either, right?
I guess
Is that basically the discretion of what we want to call, what we want to include in our streets? But our official plan does outline those requirements for considering pedestrian access, even though our development bylaw and standards just reference, I think, the general guidelines for whatever the Canadian national standard is for streets. So I'm just asking to look at applying and considering the official plan as we're requiring developers to build streets with in higher density neighborhoods.
Yep.
And then the last one, I just to follow up on Councillor McDougall's comment and Councillor Adams certainly also would be supportive of ensuring that there is a right turn lane off of Water Street East there. Water Street East itself is, it can be tricky, but and it probably warrants a wider conversation, but it just as we're continuing to see development along it, making sure that we do it as we can. So those are all my comments, but I'll certainly be supporting the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question that I just really want to have in our minutes, and I agree with all of the comments that people are saying. I think they're all important, and we certainly do, as a city, want the development in the city to happen. I guess I want to counter back on Councillor Carey's comment about traffic flow, safety issues, and you know, the questions about affordable housing. I think where I'm at, I think in the planning process, we need to, you know, look at all of those things and how important they are, and with the streets and the pathways, different things like that. I think what's on my mind is I'm wondering about the, you know, just the estimated completion of, say, the units that we're talking about. For example, you said that there was 59 units in this development proposed, as well there's 12, and then there's another application earlier that was talked about. So I look at that and I think it's really, really important in the housing aspect of it. But where my concern is not only around traffic flow and, you know, getting in and out of those areas, I'm thinking in terms of the city's responsibility. Whenever, say, for example, we hope that it would never happen, but if there is a fire, if there is anything, like, you know, we have limited numbers of crews, of firefighters, and I know we have not even been able to establish that kind of information yet, and I'm not bringing that into this conversation, but we are going to be putting more demand on our city's infrastructure and services, and I think as a city, we really need to kind of complement that by thinking about those things, and I think we really need to make a decision on some of those mandatory services that we're going to be responsible for as we continue to add housing and apartments, because some of those apartments now are maybe, say, a single story, 3 or 4 story, and again, that's going to create a lot more of an emergency demand on our fire department and our crews. So I think we need to kind of look at that when we're looking at agreements and consider some of those things. I'm not against it, but I think we also need to be considering that in our planning, because we're making decisions, but we have a volunteer fire department, so we need to remember that. So I'm not against it, but I think we need to add that piece to it. Thanks.
Click and the light came on. Sandra to the rescue. Okay. So with all that being said, some very important and valid points, absolutely, for sure. And I think something that we do need to consider as a council going forward to between now and the time that we need to make this particular decision. But I think, like Councillor McCormick said, some very valid points to consider for every application and every development going forward. So thank you, everyone, for making those astute points. Certainly not going unnoticed. I will now read the planning board recommendation, and we'll call for the vote. So preliminary subdivision approval. The planning board recommendation, preliminary subdivision approval be granted to Strategic Holdings, Inc. for preliminary subdivision to subdivide PID number 72421, creating parcel B to be consolidated to lot 1, and parcel R, public street and easement for a temporary cul-de-sac, and the remainder of PID number 72421, intended for high-density residential development, be recommended to be approved by council. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Morrison. If there are no further questions, we will call for the planning board vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And 1 member absent. And I guess I'd just like to, like I try to do every time, just kind of reiterate that the planning board recommendation, in no way necessarily endorses anything one way or another. It's just a step in the process, and council needs to make the decision at the end of the day. So, at the end of the process, I should say. So I will leave it at that and hand it back over to your worship.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess just also did you vote in favor or?
Aye.
I didn't hear it, so that's okay. I heard
Favor
Rick.
of Yeah.
the recommendation.
Yeah.
Great. With that, that's it for today, folks. Thank you for everyone coming in at a lunch hour. And we'll adjourn today's meeting. Take care. Have a great day.